I had a customer who knew that her entire family had been replaced by actors. Those had gone through extensive surgery and training to mimic their body language, way of speaking and such, while all memories of the relative they replaced had been transferred to them with a chip in the arm. She told me she was a nurse and had witnessed this in other cases. It's really crazy. This actor lives in the house of your relative, looks like him, speaks like him, knows everything that happened 20 years ago. But this isn't your relative. She was 100% convinced of this, not the smallest doubt. Her main concern was what happened to her real family. Only years later I learnt this is called Cagra delusion. I hope she got help, and that she could reunite with her family. Déjà vu. Finding something unfamiliar on a subjective level, when we know it is familiar on an objective level. E.g., walking around an area you know from childhood. Basically the opposite of déjà vu. Recently had to go back inside my elementary school I went to for K2. I'm 19 now, and man oh man I got this feeling hard. I felt like I should know this place and know my way around but was completely lost on the inside. Dude, how tiny everything looked and felt was the weirdest part for me, since I remembered everything being normal-sized back then. It really threw me for the biggest loop, realizing everything in that school was actually very tiny. Same phenomenon happens when you repeat a word so often that it doesn't seem like a real word anymore. The frequency illusion is when you start noticing something for the first time and suddenly it appears that this something suddenly crops up everywhere. In reality, this is not true. A good example is a not currently trending word you heard for the first time. Suddenly you read and hear this word all the time. You mean, once you've bought the car, you only start noticing how many of them drive around in your area. Placebo effect is the one that is the strangest to me. It's so wild, like fake thing that causes a real effect. What's even more wild is the placebo effect works on animals. And it works on humans when you tell them they're getting a placebo and show them it's a placebo. It's so weird. It works backwards, too. It's called the nocebo effect. Patients who don't believe a proven treatment will help them progress more slowly in their healing than baseline patients. Absolutely crazy how much our brain and thinking affects the real world. Blindsight blind people who have an awareness of their surroundings. Their brains still process data from their eyes at a certain level, they just can't consciously see anything. Confronting someone with information that is at odds with what their brain is used to stimulates the amygdala in the same way a physical attack does. So telling some old person that what they think the world is like is essentially wrong can be compared to a slap in the face. This can be small things as well. I tried to explain to my father once that people are making money off of YouTube as content creators, and that idea was so outlandish to him that he got angry and loud. My girlfriend at the time was really confused and scared afterwards. I already decided that if one of parents is affected by this, that I'm just go to say whatever keeps them the most at peace. I don't see why the poor people in this position need to be told their loved ones are dead all the time. Your brain kind of defrags irrelevant information. If you go on a long, uneventful drive, you might only remember the first and last 10 minutes, or something unusual in between. Because your brain deems it pointless. It happens actively too. Like how your nose is usually erased from your vision, or you don't really smell your own smells. Great. Now I'm aware of my nose in my vision. Wait till you remember your tongue won't sit comfortably no matter where it's at. Also, you are now blinking and breathing manually. People can be made to remember things that never happened. This is a large part of what caused the satanic panic. Memory is reconstructive, not recollective. And the memory likely changes a bit each time you reconstruct it. So it's likely that nothing you remember happened the way you remember it happening. If you've ever had a bad therapist that your parents sent you to, this can happen. My mom's therapist who became mine did this, and it took me years to realize what happened. I don't even think she did it on purpose. She was just bad at her job and shouldn't have taken me on as a client. After months of going to her, I was convinced I had a bedwetting problem that wasn't actually real. And that I had a masturbation problem that wasn't real. I have SDAM, stands for Severely Deficient Autobiographical Memory. I don't know of anyone else who has this condition, and there's only about 2 articles I could find about it on Google. It's non-serious and was not caused by childhood trauma that I'm aware of. I had a safe and fairly loving upbringing. It basically means I lack the ability to revisit any long-term memories. I know that certain things have happened, but I can't go back and watch it in my mind because I didn't store the experience. There are a handful of exceptions, which are mostly recent memories. There are actually blood vessels obstructing light from reaching certain areas in your eye, effectively creating a shadow. Your brain filters this out and essentially fills in the gaps so you don't actually see this spiderweb-like network of black lines. However, you can visualize them by shining a light at a diagonal into your eye, not directly, and gently wiggling it about. This means your brain doesn't have enough time to filter it out and you see this spiderweb-like network of blood vessels. I don't recall the scientific term with any certainty, but doorway syndrome. Basically, you think of one thing, then walk through a doorway, and it's gone, filed away into matters relevant to the room you just left. This is why you often forget why you just walked into the kitchen. When asking for something big, lead up to it by asking for something inconsequential at first, so the person is likely to say yes. Followed by slightly larger requests. Once a person has said yes, they feel obligated to keep saying yes. Salespeople do this a lot. OTOH. If you want something small, start by asking for something ridiculous, so by comparison, the small thing seems trivial. Salespeople do this a lot, too. Also, people are more inclined to let you do something if you give a reason. The interesting part is that it doesn't really matter what the reason is. E.g., asking to cut in front of someone at the checkout. If you ask, "Do you mind if I cut in front of you? I just need to buy these things," will be more effective than just saying, "Do you mind if I cut in front of you?" even though the reason is irrelevant. Everyone is in line because they need to buy things. Alice in Wonderland syndrome. When I was a little girl lying in bed, I would sometimes feel like I was gigantic, like my body was taking up the entire room. Or microscopically small. Winds up. This is an actual thing that happens to a fairly large amount of people, although normally just a few fleeting instances in their lifetime. Every time you remember something, the memory changes a little. Tachypsychia. Essentially, under situations of extreme stress, your mind starts processing information at such a high rate of speed that time seems to slow down in your perception. Victims of car crashes experience it. I experienced it during my first firefight in Afghanistan. It was like the entire world was slow motion. I was reminded of this today. It's possible for the human brain to read an incorrect sentence properly by filtering out excessive words. For instance, there were 2 of the word "the" in the first line. Eye doctor here. The average human blink has an interval somewhere between 4 to 6 seconds, but when we read, look at a phone, tablet, or computer for extended hours, the blink interval can reduce to once or twice per minute, and it is damaging to the eyes due to the requirement of spreading tears, but also because the glands are not being milked by blinking and therefore forcing backup of materials, and even in severe cases, death of the glands entirely. These glands are responsible for protection and comfort of the eye, and when left to die, your tears simply cannot protect the eye well enough. The mere exposure effect, or, the more familiar something is, the more positively you will think of it, even if you didn't originally like it. That's why many songs you don't initially vibe with eventually grow in you. Body integrity identity disorder describes the extremely rare phenomenon of peoples who desire the amputation of one or more healthy limbs. Some of these people mutilate themselves, others ask surgeons for an amputation. The fact that you can make yourself laugh is so interesting to me that our subconscious can come up with something on its own, delivers it to the conscious part of the brain, and it finds it funny. Also, creativity in general. Alien hand syndrome. A cognitive disassociation where a person essentially loses control of one of their hands and arms. It doesn't sit there lifeless. It performs actions without their knowledge as if it had a mind of its own. Your brain tricks you into thinking your biggest weaknesses are your biggest strengths, and the other way around. Please subscribe and ring the notification bell for more.